30-Odd Minutes is sponsored in part by Digital Dowsing. Who are you powered by?
For the next 30 minutes, we will explore the unexplained. From mysteries beyond our galaxy to ghostly phenomena in our own backyard. We will dive into our psychic abilities and explore everything from conspiracies to the just plain weird. Welcome to 30-Odd Minutes. If the truth is out there, we will find it. But only by sheer accident.
Welcome to 30-Odd Minutes, live from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, Phenomenology 105. I'm Jeff Belanger, your host, captain of the mothership. We fly through time and space each and every week, and you may have seen some strange lights over Gettysburg. That was our ship. And if you talk about it, you know, it's not going to go well for you. 2 words. Anal probe. And there he is. Now you know what they called him in high school. All right. I'm not alone this week. Thank goodness. We've got an illustrious panel up here. I'm going to start right to my right. Brandon Hodge from MysteriousPlanchette.com. Robert Murch, Ouija Board collector, historian, psychic medium Chris Fleming. From Scared and Haunted Collector, the tech guy, Brian Cano. And of course, from Darkness Radio and Paranormal Challenge, Dave Schrader. Unlike other 30-Odd Minute live shows, what we're doing here tonight, we're going to talk about spirit communication. And we've got a great panel to do this with, because we're going to talk about the history of it and how we got to where we are today. And we're going to do that all in under 30 minutes. And I started thinking about it because I got to drive down here with Murch. We both come from the Massachusetts area, and as we're driving down, we got kind of lost. And I realized I pretty much need a new policy to never travel with paranormal people. So here's kind of how it went.
Murch, I really think we're lost. That's okay. I got something that'll get us back on track. GPS? Oh, I got something better. I've ever done this in a car. How do we get to Gettysburg? S O U T H. South? That doesn't help. This doesn't help.
We weren't texting while driving. All right, and you know, we were so annoyed because that really wasn't helpful information. We kind of pushed our luck with the spirits, and there's another
Are
tape.
we there yet? No. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
So we had some really pissed off spirits in the car that got us nowhere near, but we eventually made it, thank goodness. And it got me thinking, how did we get here? Instead of using GPS, we were using Ouija boards to try to navigate the streets of Pennsylvania. And the story starts in 1848 with the Fox sisters, the birth of the spiritualist movement. It's that moment we can trace everything to when it comes to ghost investigations. Now, of course, there were ghosts before, you know, the Fox sisters. There was spirit communication before that. But this is the start of a movement. And we're going to kind of jump off from there. I'm going to turn this over to Brandon first, because you know about seances and things like that mediums were doing, but then there starts to be devices, actual physical devices that people can use to try to communicate with spirits. So 1848's that line in the sand. How soon before we start to see devices like planchettes and other things?
Well, the important thing about spirit communication in the late 1840s is that you're relying either on a tipping table where you're literally pounding out communications, or alphabet calling, which entails literally calling out the alphabet one letter at a time until you get some knock, rap, or indication that you've arrived at the chosen letter. And as you can imagine, even in a day before television and radio, that could get rather tedious and laborious, just trying to spell out words and sentences. So the first devices start showing up within a few years. Alphabet cards, where they would point to the letters instead to try to expedite the communication, as well as more complicated devices. One, the Isaac Pease spiritual telegraph dial, was actually a box with a clock-like dial on it and an index pointer and a weighted pulley. You throw it off to the side of the table, and as you tipped your table, the index would spin on the pulley. And before long, in Paris, you have the spiritualists there actually take a basket to facilitate automatic writing, and they plunge a pencil through it, and they all put their hands on it, and that's really the first breakthrough in cooperative automatic writing and spirit communication is the planchette, which is what that it quickly evolves into, which is French for little board. We have a specimen carefully concealed within my coat. That's a 1875 Selkow and Ryder scientific planchette. So that's one of our earliest forms right there.
Okay. I think it says scientific planchette,
That's right.
which I think is great, right? Because we're still using scientific planchettes today, aren't we? And we're going to get there. We're going to get forward in time for sure. So the idea, though, is to, these mediums have the ability, but these devices put that in the hands of everybody. Everybody's got this chance now to try to communicate. So let's move forward a little bit in time to the Ouija board, this very polarizing thing. Murch, is there a demon in there?
Yes. Yes, there is. There's a demon in every Ouija board. It's part of what you get when you buy one. No,
So what year does it start, the talking board?
So in 1886, we see the birth of the talking board. And we say talking board because Ouija is a trademark that's owned by Hasbro and Parker Brothers today. So talking board's the general term. In Ohio, a bunch of people decide to take the planchette that was separate and lay it on top of the talking board, and instead of writing out the answer, it would point out these letters. And so what would happen is it became manufactured in 1890 in Baltimore. So for the first time, these devices were mass manufactured all over the United States and were put into the homes of anybody. So before this, you might have to hire a medium, which would cost a lot of money, to make contact. And all of a sudden, anyone could make contact for $1.50 in their house. And so one of the things you see early on is a switch. The talking board is born out of the spiritualist movement, and yet they turn on the board very quickly. And they say things like, this is dangerous, you don't know what you're doing, this could open up a portal, you need me, an experienced person, to go through this. And what was happening is that's partly true, and the other side is this was cutting into business. And so today, almost 125 years later, we're still playing with them.
And it's so it's always kind of been polarizing, but now even more so. But and Chris, I'd like your reaction to this. I've heard you talk before. We all have psychic ability to varying degrees. Do you think some of these devices just help us tap into it, almost like training wheels on a bike, or are we opening it up, or is it just out there for us to tap into?
Well, the big thing is the research that's been done using any type of device, whether in forms of ITC or Ouija boards. You look at George Meeks. You look at the Ouija board, of course. People that have had experiences communicating with spirits as a mediumship or as a psychic get incredible results using these devices because they're already communicating with spirits. Sure. So what's happening is this is giving an opportunity for other people to witness that communication. They get to see the board move around and communicate, or with ITC, they get to hear the actual spirits communicate. When you look at the spirit column, they had the psychic that was working with the spirit column, and the results were phenomenal. But when they would take anybody else, they would get nothing. So what they found out is that in any type of spirit communication, it helps to have a medium establish that connection, and then to receive those responses through whatever type of technique or device they're using.
Do you think they're dangerous? Do you think Ouija boards can be dangerous?
It depends upon what your intent is. I mean, when you look at what I believe, Ouija boards can be dangerous if a particular evil spirit wants to come through. And it's very similar to the myths of the vampires. If you allow them into your home, once they're in the home, something can happen. I think any form of communication can be dangerous, even using the spirit box. If you let negative entities come through, you have to set the parameters. That is very important.
Right. Dave, have you had a Ouija board experience?
My first Ouija board experience was in high school. And, you know, I'd gotten drunk and it was dressed pretty.
Right.
So, oh no, my first Ouija, we were at a party. You know, we were starting off with the typical stiff as a board, light as a feather, and lifting people with one finger and amazing each other. And then we broke out the Ouija board, and we were trying to communicate with the spirit of many great leaders of our time, like John Lennon and Elvis Presley and Bob Dylan. And then I realized Dylan wasn't dead, yet he still had the most interesting things to say. Well, we were getting all these really creepy responses on there, right? I mean, he kept spelling out die, and it's just really bizarre. So we get done, and we're all sitting there, and the Ouija board is on the table with the planchette. And we're all sitting around the little coffee table chattering about it and how freaked out we are. And the planchette just went and flipped right off the table. And I had to go home and change my underwear. And then I just really kind of left Ouija boards alone again for about 20 years.
What about you, Brian? Have you had a Ouija experience?
The only really Ouija board experience I've had was last year when I fell into a box and broke one. Unfortunately, this is something that, again, I don't know if it was broken in the box or that I caused the break to happen.
But now you've released the souls of the demons!
And you're all part of it now. It's hard because it's one of those things I always felt like Parker Brothers cannot package the supernatural. It's not like a toy in a Cracker Jacks box. It's like, hey, buy the Ouija and you get your own demon. No. But like Chris says, it's intent, so it's one of those things where, like, yeah, I fell on it. I'm not opening any doors. It's a piece of cardboard, and I broke it. But I wasn't concerned about that because I wasn't using it. I wasn't actively engaged with it.
Right.
You know, but I got to say something. When my mom and I used to do Ouija board a lot, and some demons did start coming through, and some scary stuff started happening, we ended up throwing the Ouija board away. And you know, garbage was, I think, that Monday. Later in the day, you know, garbage came, everything, we opened up the door, and the Ouija board was sitting there on the front porch. So we don't know if somebody took it out of the garbage and put it there, or if it just ended up there. So that was really creepy. And it's an honest, good story.
And I think one of the things people forget is that whatever you're communicating with, it's you and something else. You and your subconscious, you know, you and the ghost or spirit, sorry. And I think that, you know, this, like they're saying, is a device. It's a tool. And it's not the evil thing. It's whatever you're doing or communicating with.
Right, and if you've ever worked with Chris, you know he's a tool for the paranormal. They'll communicate just as much as a Ouija board.
I think a relevant parallel for the times we're going through right now, the whole gun issue. It's like, look, it's what is done with what is created. It by itself is not the evil thing. It's what it's done with it. It's the intent that's behind it. And we can argue this all day, but I'm just going to pass the microphone.
Yeah. Way to open that.
Yeah. Bring up the hot topics.
Yeah. Right. No. That's, and so now, let's step boldly from the 1890s now and jump ahead into modern times. You know, the technology evolved quickly. Electricity comes around, radio, then television, audio recording, video recording. And suddenly we have all of these devices that can record sound and video and take pictures. And we have reports of spirit photography. We have early reports of strange audio anomalies, you know, on recordings. And so anytime we have a piece of technology that can be used for communication, it doesn't take long for someone to try to adapt it for spirit communication. Well, if it can communicate with the living, maybe it can communicate with the dead. And now we're getting to what Chris said earlier, ITC, instrumental transcommunication. And what's fascinating, the EVP go back to really the 1940s and 50s, though there are reports from the first years of the 1900s of strange audio recordings. The intent to actually try to record it goes back to the 50s, so it's been around a while. So now, you know, why do you think this is, Brian, you know, being the tech guy, why do you think this is that we're starting to adapt all of this stuff for spirit communication? Is there any limit to it? And how do you define where we go with it?
I think because the curiosity has been there. I mean, the active search for the afterlife and contacting our loved ones, and that need to know that we continue, that's not a new thing. So I feel like no matter what happens, what the new tech is, you know, people have been adapting their Xbox 360s to do 3D imaging, and it's like, wow, we're taking everything in an attempt to communicate. I personally just want them to text me because it'll be easier. Right. I get free unlimited text, so please, you know, reach out and touch. I think as thank you. How you doing? I think that as time goes on, there will be no limits. I think there will be no limit or no end to this need to repurpose. I mean, hell, half the gear in my kit is from Home Depot and is repurposed from other conditions. It's only recently now that people are fashioning devices with the intent of, yes, let's use this specifically for paranormal investigations.
Right. And Chris, I know you use a lot of gear as well. I mean, do you think that, you know, what is it? You know, let's talk about like K2 meters and EMF meters. You know, people, it's measuring electromagnetic force, but how are we using those? How are we manipulating these devices to forge communication with the other side? How do you think that's working from the spirit's perspective?
Well, I don't know exactly how it's working on their perspective and what exactly they're doing. We don't know. When you look at the spirit box, you know, these devices are being modified in certain ways that we believe based on theory that we can communicate with them. And it's working. We're getting results. So is it our perspective that is causing this to happen, or are they telling us something consciously or subconsciously? But when you've got the spirit box and you've got them talking to it, we believe they're using the frequencies. Somehow they're in between the frequencies to communicate with us white noise. Because remember, they don't have vocal cords. So it's basically telepathy in a way, transfer of thought. They're using that transfer of thought with some type of available energy source, which is the radio sweep, that is projecting that communication to us. And we're obviously hearing it with our ears.
Right. And Brian and Dave, too. I know you guys usually pass it down. I know Brian and Dave, you guys are using a lot of the gear over the years. Is there a piece of equipment that's your go-to, that you trust it? You trust the results?
You know, I've really become a fan of the Shack Hack when that was first introduced. It was kind of the everyman's version of the Frank's box and the Spirit box. It was Bill Chappell was able to take a little Radio Shack radio and hack it so that it would not stop scanning the dial, and you could get these deals. Now, what was fascinating, and I realized this, I was reminded of this by my mom a few years ago, I think why my fascination is so big with the Shack Hack is the fact that when I was a kid, you know, I grew up in the 70s during the time of Smokey and the Bandit and the Dukes of Hazzard and, you know, Convoy, and I loved CB radios. And I used to have this little AM/FM CB radio scanner, and it had a button on it, and if I was like from here to Jeff away from a trucker, I could talk to him on my CB, but no closer, I mean, or no further away. It had to be within like 5 feet of each other. And I remember listening intently in my room when I'd be playing with my action figures and such. I'd listen to the CB radio just to hear what kind of cool stuff. And I have these memories of, you know, I'd be playing with my G.I. Joe and I'd be like, and I'd throw him off my bed. And then I'd remember clearly hearing this really weird mechanical tinny voice go, "That looks like it hurt." And I'd be like, and then I go back to playing and I do something and it would respond to what I was doing in my room, which as a teenager getting ready for puberty is not a good idea to know that it knows what I'm doing in my room, right? But this radio would actually communicate with me, and it freaked me out so bad I gave it to my dad and never touched it again. And 2 years ago, my dad gave it back to me, and I still have not put batteries into it. But the Shack Hack being one of my favorite tools, I guess it stems from the fact that I had one of my first Shack Hacks, and I didn't even realize it when I was about 12 years old playing with that. But the idea that we could catch in real time that communication, and to hear these voices possibly coming back from somewhere, responded. But that's the exciting part. Is it the other side? Is it somebody else sitting in their room, one dimension over, with their Shack Hack radio trying to communicate, and we're just hearing each other? And I don't know, that's why I think the paranormal is so cool. Every layer you peel back of the onion, every time you think you're getting closer to the answer, 20 more questions unfold, and it's that constant journey.
Right. Brian, same question to you. Any piece of go-to gear that you trust the results?
I do love the Shack Hack too, but I still find I rely on a digital audio recorder still a lot, because it's one of those things where it's not receiving a signal, and as great results as we do get with Shack Hacks and SB7s and things of the time, I always have that wondering question in my mind: is that a radio station? Is that a signal it's picking up? Digital audio recorder, I know it's just me and whatever is ambient in the room, so that will always be a solid part of my kit.
Right.
I got one funny story, especially because you work with John Zaffis. For those of you that watch Haunted Collector, John Zaffis, the reigning, godfather of the paranormal, great guy. First introduction to the Frank's box was at the Stanley Hotel in the concert hall, and we're downstairs. Sounds like a Clue game. In the concert hall, in the basement, with Professor Plum and the Shack Hack, and we're down there with John. And if you've listened to it for a while, you get that and the squelching voices, and it starts to get on your nerves. And we're down there, and we're getting nothing. And this is an actual Frank's box. We're just getting these. And about 20 minutes into it, John Zaffa stands up and he goes, "Well, dude, I think I've had enough." The radio stops on a dime and goes, "Welcome to the Old Timers Club." And John Zaffa turns to her and goes, "Like I need this crap from the other side."
It's a true story.
So, Brandon, you had a follow-up on this?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up with my peers on the group. Why is it that the older technology, Murch and I, sitting at our table surrounded by planchettes and Ouija boards all day, get to watch the shudder that comes over people at the mere sight of a talking board? So why is it that the
Are you sure it was the talking board they were shuddering at? Just a thought.
I tried to shave.
Yes.
So why is it that the older technology elicits that negative response, yet the newer technology, what's the difference in a wooden board printed with letters and numbers or a piece of technology with dials and knobs that are manipulated? So I would like to hear the perspective from you guys.
Well, we get audio voice is the one thing that our sense of hearing can hear it, you know, opposed to just, okay, so the board picked certain words and we got to make sense of that, which I've had great success with the Ouija board growing up as a kid. I mean, just incredible stuff I learned about Europa. You know, that there was life in Europa well before CNN even said there was. You know, the ghosts and spirits come to my house getting to know their names. You know, but then we have audio technology where you can play it back for anybody else. And when you get the EVPs, you don't hear anything because we only hear at 20 hertz and it's picking up below the 20 hertz. There's someone there creating that voice. So now we know we actually have communication going on. It's personality, whether it's male, female. We have to ask that question, but right away when you get a direct response, it's, you know, it's recorded, documented evidence. You know, and I think that's the only difference. But the Ouija board is the one thing that started it all. You know? Thank you.
Not to mention, I think we live in a society where new is cool and sexy, and new only lasts for so long until something new comes along and replaces it. It's almost like, oh, I love that. It's not hard. It's almost like I could pull out Merlin's staff and summon something, or I could pull out my ghost detector by Apple, bling, you know, made in California. I think both are valid, old school and new school. They work. If something happened and all the power went out and we were thrust into darkness, we could still keep doing our work. We would just have to do it differently.
I guess, why is no one burning their Frank's box?
I'll tell you why.
Some people are, though.
I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
I believe this is why the older technology got a bum rap from the movie The Exorcist. Wow. And when they remake The Exorcist 2015, and instead of going to the Ouija board, they use a shack-hack radio, it will become the new demonized tool, because that got all of the popularity and all of the focus of the evil, which is funny because, Bob, in the movie The Exorcist, which obviously is a turning point, because there were popular songs written about the Ouija board, there were games, it was on the cover of Saturday Evening Post, done by one of our most heralded artists in the world. Norman Rockwell drew a portrait of it. But that turning point was exactly how many seconds of a 2-hour movie?
Yeah, you just have like a minute of, you know, the movie where it indicates she was using this board, and suddenly that left her open to demon possession. And I think what's really interesting is people personalize the board. The board is evil. This is what's doing it. I got to get this out of my house, rather than the act of communicating. So this was the tool that was around. I mean, for 125 years, you've got a lot of urban legends. You have a lot of stories, generations of people talking about these, passing them down. And because, you know, Ouija boards are often people's first experience with the paranormal, it's very traumatic. You know, the first time you use it, like you said, you know, using it at a party. All those things together have kind of created this thing that the technology makes us like a bridge. It's further away. So it feels safer to ask a question to something that blinks at you. Well, like it makes it blink, it's not doing anything to me. And Jeff and I have had this conversation many times. You know, if something over there can make it blink, it could probably toss something at my head. And, you know, that's not super safe for me. You know, like, I don't want to get whacked up the head. But at the same time, perfect. So I just think, you know, again, I kind of fall with it's the act of communicating is where you're working with something unexplainable.
Right. And so the shack hack and all this gear, you know, the audio stuff, which is so, it is compelling. You hear something that blows you away. You hear a voice. Sometimes you even recognize the voice. Yeah, and a personality, like you said. And the information we glean from it, what we do with it. Another thing happened this weekend with Chris and I, and it's now my policy after this to never, ever again travel with paranormal people, because this is what happened when Chris and I were driving around.
Chris, man, I think we're completely lost.
No, we're not. We're fine.
Do you know where to go?
Yeah, don't worry about it. I got the GPS 7.
What the hell is that?
It's the new Spirit Box navigation system.
Well, we gotta get somewhere, because I have no idea where we're going.
All right, hang on, let me talk to him. Hey, Spirits. We're lost. Can you tell us where to go? Yeah, we want it. We want to know where we're going. You're not going to take me. Why not? Stop? Supposed to stop. We gotta go the other way.
Where do we go?
The other way.
I think it said right.
It just said you can.
Oh, man. This is useless.
Oh, it did. Come on. All right, Spirits, one at a time. You're confusing us. One Spirit. Do we go north or south? Go on the USS. You know what that is?
USS? That's a ship. We're in the middle of Pennsylvania. Dude!
It really said that.
It was
really saying it.
words were coming through the car stereo, and I was like, man,
It was amazing.
Way to fly.
imagine an 8-hour drive of that. Next it'll be on airplanes, and then we're really going to start getting somewhere. But we only have a couple minutes left, but let's end on the topic of belief. You know, belief makes reality for a lot of people. You know, belief makes the messages real. Belief in that there really is something on the other side, or your subconscious or whatever. You know, what role does belief play, and how skeptical should you be of your own senses? Let's go down the line.
Belief, that's a funny question for me. I tend to, as a researcher, I tend to have a very skeptical view. I like to step back from the objects, you know, especially when you're filling your house with these, you know, reportedly evil things, right? So I tend to step back and sort of remove myself from it and leave those questions to the higher moral authorities.
Like Bob Murch.
Yeah, a much higher pay grade than myself. But yeah, there's certainly, you know, I don't deny there's something to it, but I don't necessarily subscribe to anything in particular.
I think, you know, why has the Ouija board been around for 125 years, and why are we still talking about it? People want to believe that they can make contact with something else out there, and that the fact that they've lost someone or want to do something, this could help. And so belief is a huge part. In fact, I've never seen the talking board or Ouija board work when people sitting at the table completely did not believe it was going to. So I think, again, whether that's you making the communication, you've turned something on that allows that communication, this is just the tool. And because it's 125 years old, we give credence to it.
Chris, belief?
You look in the last 150 years of all the study and research that's been done, and look at the book 21 Days Investigating the Afterlife, and the summary was, all the research ever done, study, scientific, it is the perception and belief of the individual in communicating. Whether using a digital recorder or whatever, they will get the most incredible evidence. If they fully are passionate, totally into it, and their intent is pure in communicating, they will get results. Fact.
I feel like belief sets you on your path, but once you're on that path, you have to almost separate yourself from that. The old adage is the glass half empty or half full. There's only one truth to that. You could say it's half full and have your reasons. You could say it's half empty and have your reasons. The only fact is that there's liquid in the glass. As investigators, that's the only thing we can really have. Belief is secondary to that fact, but the reason we got to that at all is because of the belief that we are trying to find something.
Very nice.
And, you know, speaking on belief, I'll just speak with probably what everybody out in the audience feels and all of us up here. I don't know that we'll ever have the answers, but in the immortal words of Fox Mulder, I want to believe. And I think that's what's going to keep us always moving forward and trying to make these communications.
Right, sir. Guys, thank you so much. Our panel, we are pretty much out of time. The mothership has to take off again. For Dave, Brian, Chris, Murch, and Brandon, thank you so much. Thank you, Phenomenology 105. Until next time.